welcome to World News on the Papyrus Global TV. My name is Christiana Barbayo, and here are the headlines. Trump praises Rwanda and DRC leaders as they sign U.S. brokered peace deal. Kenya, United States sign $1.6 billion health sector deal under America First strategy. U.S. deportation flights to Venezuela continue despite Trump airspace closure threat. Western Cuba plunged into darkness as massive blackout hits. Russia imposes FaceTime restrictions as Moscow expands internet crackdown. U.S. peace proposal stalls as Russia rejects part of the plans. President Donald Trump on Thursday, December 4th, praised the leaders of Democratic Republic of Congo, DRC, and Rwanda for signing a historic peace and economic cooperation agreement aimed at ending decades of conflict in eastern Congo. The accord, negotiated under U.S. mediation and signed in Washington, renews hopes for stability in a region long plagued by violence. At the signing, Presidents Felix Tshisekedi and Paul Kagame pledged commitment to disarmament, troop withdrawal, and regional economic integration. The agreement also opens the door for U.S. access to Congo's mineral-rich regions, a major factor behind Washington's push, as outlined by the White House. Despite the optimism, the situation on ground remains fragile. Clashes between the Congolese army and the rebel group M23 continue in parts of South Kivu, raising doubts about the immediate impact of the deal. Observers warn that success will depend on full compliance by all parties, including rebel groups, and meaningful steps towards demobilization and justice. President Trump described the moment as a great day for Africa, a great day for the world, affirming U.S. readiness to support post-agreement reconstruction and economic investment. Whether the accord will translate into lasting peace or simply reshuffle alliances, especially in contests for mineral wealth, remains uncertain. Kenya has signed a 5-year, $1.6 billion health sector pact with the United States government under its America First global health strategy. The accord aims to strengthen Kenya's health infrastructure, disease control capacity, and long-term health system resilience. Under the deal, Kenya is expected to significantly increase its own funding for health, including commitments of about $850 million US, while the US shifts from the NGO-led aid to direct support of government-managed health programs. The agreement covers key sectors including infectious disease prevention, HIV/AIDS, malaria, tuberculosis, polio, maternal and child health, and health system strengthening. The agreement is seen as a pivot in U.S.-Africa health diplomacy, emphasizing local ownership and sustainable investment rather than traditional aid-driven models. Kenyan President William Ruto welcomed the pact, affirming that it will enable better delivery of primary healthcare services, strengthen health system data management, and enhance preparedness for future health emergencies. The deal is being watched closely across Africa as it may become a template for similar engagements, especially in countries struggling with health financing shortfalls, workforce gaps, and heavy reliance on international donors. Experts say success will depend on transparent implementation, efficient fund utilization, and sustained commitments from both partners. US-operated flights carrying deported migrants to Venezuela have resumed and continued as scheduled, even after former US President Donald Trump demanded the Venezuelan airspace be considered closed. Despite earlier announcements that deportation flights would be suspended, the government of Nicolas Maduro reversed the decision at Washington's request, authorizing twice-weekly flights. The newest flight landed at Simon Bolivar International Airport outside Caracas. The resumptions come after a turbulent few days in which the threat to close Venezuela's airspace had triggered uncertainty. But with formal overflight and landing applications submitted by US-based carriers, deportation have persisted. More than 13,000 Venezuelan migrants have already returned this year under the repatriation scheme, with the latest chartered flights bringing hundreds more back. The decision underscores that despite provocative diplomatic rhetoric, operational cooperation on deportations is ongoing. We will now go on a short break, and when we come back, the news will continue. Stay tuned.
The Papyrus Global, we don't just cover events, we create cinematic experiences. From red carpets to birthdays, gala dinners, And your fairy tale weddings, we bring your moments to life with high-tech precision. Our gadgets are smarter, our lenses sharper, and our team simply world-class. Trust the Papyrus Global to tell your story in the boldest, brightest way possible.
Welcome back, and now the news will continue.
A major power outage struck western regions of Cuba on Wednesday, December 3rd, leaving the capital Havana and several provinces without electricity after a transmission line failure triggered a collapse of the national grid. The blackout affected millions of residents across Havana and neighboring provinces, compounding long-standing energy shortages, fuel constraints, and the gradual deterioration of Cuba's aging power infrastructure. Authorities said technicians began restoring electricity gradually by afternoon, but warned that the grid remains under heavy strain with intermittent supply expected while repairs continue. For many inhabitants, the outage disrupted everyday life. Power supply, internet services, small businesses, and essential services were affected. The blackout has been described by some residents as a bitter reminder of the fragility of Cuba's power system. Analysts note that this latest incident adds to a troubling pattern of repeated grid failures this year, underscoring the urgent need for infrastructure overhaul and sustainable energy solutions in Cuba. Russian authorities have imposed restrictions on Apple's FaceTime video calling service nationwide, marking the latest step in a sweeping government campaign to control digital communications. The state internet regulator says the ban responds to law enforcement claims that FaceTime has been used to organize and conduct terrorist activities and to facilitate fraud and other crimes. This measure follows a series of bans and restrictions on other popular platforms, encrypted messaging, and social media services such as WhatsApp, Telegram, Snapchat, Roblox, Viper, Signal, YouTube, and major social networks have been already blocked, restricted, or throttled in recent months. Officials argue that the clampdown is necessary to safeguard national security, but critics, including cybersecurity experts and digital rights advocates, warn that the move is less about crime prevention and more about state surveillance and censorship. They note that the government has simultaneously rolled out a domestic messaging platform called MAX, which lacks end to end encryption and openly shares user data with security authorities. For millions of Russians who relied on FaceTime, especially after bans on other platforms, the restriction has disrupted everyday communication, raising alarms about privacy, free expression, and internet freedom as the government broadens its digital control infrastructure. Tensions deepened around the proposed US backed peace plan to end war between Russia and Ukraine after Russian President Vladimir Putin publicly stated that several elements of the plan are unacceptable to Moscow. The remarks followed a high profile meeting in Moscow involving US envoys and President Donald Trump's team. Putin described the US proposal not as a final agreement but as a set of issues put forward for discussion. He warned that unless Ukrainian forces withdraw from territories occupied by Russia, Moscow will pursue its aims by force. The plan, widely believed to include territorial concessions in regions such as Crimea and Donbass, limitations on Ukraine's military size, and a constitutional ban on NATO membership for Ukraine, has sparked intense debate. Critics argue those terms heavily favor Russia and compromise Ukraine's sovereignty and long-term security. Despite mediation efforts and what US officials described as a productive session in Geneva, the lack of consensus between Moscow and Kiev has slowed progress. For many in Ukraine and its Western allies, the continued offensives and political infighting signal that any lasting peace remains elusive. And that brings us to the end of World News on the Papyrus Global TV. My name is Christiana Babayo. Thanks for joining us.